Vitaliy Katsenelson. What a pleasure speaking to this man. He's first an investor, has an investment firm. He's also a professor. He's also a writer, many essays. He's an author, just released a book. You have to take a look at Soul in the Game. Uh, Fascinating man, and how he arrived to Stoicism. He was Russian born. He came over in the 90s. We do open up with, his perspective on the, geopolitical war that's happening with Russia and Ukraine. Fascinating perspective from a Russian born, and how, World War II and Nazism put such a, indent and impression on that society. And he calls it a civil war, which is a fascinating take I've never heard before. I know you'll enjoy that. And we get to talking about, I ask him about investing. Are there products that he believes in, that he uses, that he would never invest in? We have a couple of cases there, a couple of strong ones. But he's a fascinating man, and he writes every day. We talk about discipline, of course, and what motivates him. But you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Vitaliy. I did as well. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic. I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family, in their passion, in their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Yeah, I read the book. I read your essays. I read. Let's get going, Vitaliy. I appreciate you doing this. I have so many questions. So, I want to talk about Stoicism. I want to talk about investment. I want to talk about, you're a writer. You're an author. You're heavily into art. I based on your latest interviews and I know you want to talk about the book and your essays. You were Russian born. I believe you left there about 2009. You talk about, I think we as Americans don't quite grasp how the gravity of World War II was to Russians and what's happening now. I think I need to hear from you what we should know about what's going on now in this geopolitical, war that's happening there.
Well, let me correct you a little bit.
Please.
I left in 1991.
Ah,
I almost literally, you can say, turn off the lights on Soviet Union because it's literally. I think it fell apart officially months later. So um,
hmm.
so I've been in the United States for more than 30 years now. Um, so I was when the war started with Ukraine, and I'll be completely honest. I was shocked by that war. I never thought a war like this could happen. In fact, the more the if you grew up in Russia or in Soviet Union, that war was just unimaginable because just you have to understand what Soviet Union was. So you had this. It was this. If you look so I grew up in Russia, but I had I had friends who were from Belarus, from Ukraine, from Moldova, and culturally we shared the same culture, and we share this, even though the Ukrainians had their own language and so did Belarusians, but we communicated using Russian language, and nobody felt and like most Ukrainians do today, they still speak Russian. In fact, uh, the president, Zelensky, Vladimir Zelensky, when he made a show about that about him being president, that show was made in Russian.
Wow.
Like, that's not Ukrainian. But anyway, so when I was growing up in Russia, so going back to that, when I was growing up in Russia, I really could not tell the difference between Russian and Ukrainian. It's like it was very similar culture, same language. We love the same movie. We listen to the same movies. We listen to similar, same songs. So this is as civil war as it gets.
Mm.
Like, when I look at it today, this is basically, to me, is a civil war between two you know like two nations. And I am shocked by this war for another reason. All my life when I was in Russia, I hated Nazi Germany because of the World War II. And I was reminded what Germans did to Russia, Soviet Union during World War II, very, very often. And then today, Russian behavior is not any different than Nazi Germany's behavior during World War II.
Wow.
Yeah, so they just they killed tens of thousands of people, innocent people in Mariupol. Yes, they don't necessarily focus on Jews. They don't have concentration camps, but they deported tens of thousands of people from Ukraine. There's a tens of thousands of kids are missing, and they've been just completely, basically, almost kidnapped from Ukraine and now somewhere in Russia. Um, uh, it's a there's a, I don't know, millions of refugees, spread out across Europe now. So to me that war is a, let me tell you what impact it had on me. I stopped giving any interviews about any topics unrelated to the war for the first 2 or 3 months of the war.
I saw that.
Nothing really mattered, to me, at that point in time. So, about the war. So anyway, okay, that's a what if what a happy way what a happy way to start a conversation.
Yeah, knowing that you did that, you wouldn't do any interviews unless you talked about it, and, your essays, I wanted you to kind of, I didn't know if it's on your chest, or, if it's something we should just kind of address first, the elephant in the
Sure,
room.
sure. I wrote 5 essays on the war, and they are very long essays. And I think in those essays, I tried to explain how I view this war as somebody who was born in Russia.
Right.
And also, I have an advantage because I also speak Russian. So I ended up reading a lot of newspapers and watching a lot of getting a lot of information in Russian from YouTube, etc. So I I would suggest your readers go to Contrarian Edge and read those 5 essays, because I think they would really benefit tremendously, because I think I provide their important insights into the war.
Very much so. And as far as, I mean, your kind of main bread and butter is investing.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of your content, how people are kind of, throwing questions at you, and the negative effect that the war is having, not only on the European
Mhm.
economy, but on ours, is, do you think there's an end in sight?
Well, okay, so so the war. I don't know how long the war will last.
Right.
I think there's a good chance the war may, the Ukrainians, the first, if you look at it, the first couple months, Ukrainians were doing spectacularly well. Okay. Last month, I think they needed more weapons. They were not running out of weapons. They need more weapons, and the weapons from the West have not arrived yet. So they've been losing this war for last month. I think you're going to see a lot more weapons coming from the West, which may help Ukraine. And I'll be completely honest. I'm not sure how objective I am. I'm not
Mm.
sure if it's a wishful thinking on my part, but I think Ukraine could win this war, and let me define victory,
Hmm.
is be able to push Russia, from its territories. I'm not sure if it's going to be able to get Crimea or not. I'm not sure it will get there, but I think there is a good chance that it will be able to push Russia, from its territories, pre-February 24 territories. Now, the impact on the global economy, it's going to be, I think in the short term, is going to be significant, and it's significant because a couple things. I mean, the most important factor is there are two. Number one, energy prices. Russia is one of the largest exporters of natural gas to Europe, the largest exporter of natural gas to Europe. It produces about 10% of global oil. And as I understand, as of right now, production of Russian oil is basically hasn't really changed so far. So the oil prices went up in expectation that
See.
this production will decline. Um, but uh, but I would argue that one of the another large effect we're going to have from this war is food inflation.
Hmm.
Let me explain you what I mean. So the it's going to come from two sources. The first one is less significant. I think Russia, Ukraine are largest exporters of wheat. Okay, so Russia, if I remember right, Russia said they're not going to export wheat. You know, and Ukraine is trying to export wheat, but it can't. Okay, we looked at the data and we found that about Russia and Ukraine together account for about 7% of total world's production of wheat.
Hmm.
And in the past, when we had droughts, you had cases where the supply declined by 7%, and the wheat prices would go up by 2 or 3%, or some not a significant amount. Now, what really worries me about this is not the wheat; it's fertilizers. So
Hmm.
there are two main fertilizer groups: potassium and nitrogen. Potassium is made out of potash, and now this is where Russia and Belarus are second and third largest exporters of potash. And nitrogen is basically derived um, from natural gas. And as natural gas prices are making probably a decade high, uh, so the nitrogen prices. So I think the we are still eating last year's crops. Um, my concern is that food prices in the future, going forward, for the next 3 6 months, will be significantly higher. Or food prices. I'm talking about all calorie prices. From meat to corn, etc., to avocados will be significantly higher because of uh, uh, higher prices of fertilizers.
It's very interesting. I know I often think, well, farms are here, they're fine, but yeah, there's plenty of minerals and what you said there, fertilizer that we need as well for them to grow, and that's got to be brought in and or wherever the farming is occurring. So it's not just the farm itself, but the things that they need as well.
Yeah, no, and remember the fertilizer prices are global prices,
Hmm.
right? So if the prices in, I don't know, let's pick a country in Europe are much higher than they are in the United States, the potash, which is Canadian company, will be shipping their potassium to potash to Europe.
Hmm.
So it's a so the yeah so the what's happening to fertilizer prices, so in other words, when you remove supply of fertilizer from the market, or you make it a lot more expensive, that's going to impact all farmers globally,
Hmm.
without exception.
You have a great quote that I've kind of adopted since following you that
Mhm.
I love and I try to adopt where we worry micro, but we invest macro.
Yeah, yeah. So the problem is the everything I told you about the oil price, about the commodities, etc. I could end up being completely wrong.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is very simple. economy is an incredibly complex system, and it's incredibly difficult to analyze it and forecast it. So the way we look at this, as investors, the way we look at it, we try to identify we try to identify threats and benefits that are long term in nature. That would be macro threats and then benefits, and then adjust our portfolio, that's now I'm talking micro, accordingly. So, and in other words, as an investor, when I'm analyzing a company, and let's say if I was analyzing a company that has exposure to consumer, I would probably be very conservative in my growth assumptions for this company's sales, right?
Hmm.
And then also, I would probably want to have even greater margin of safety for that company, just because there's a lot more headwinds right now.
Yeah, it's I often I always hear the expression from friends and stuff. I don't play the market. I don't play stocks. I don't have the stomach for it. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, I think I would have a problem with the word play.
Mm,
Okay, because when you say the word play, that sounds to me that that
it's a
person is
game.
uh, it's a game, it's a casino.
Mm,
Um, well, stock market could be a casino, and for a lot of people it is,
right.
and it should not be.
Mm,
Or if it is, just spend as much money, just take as much money as you take into Vegas, and then invest in the stock market, and then you save yourself money on the air ticket, and help the environment. Great,
right.
you. Okay, now uh, so the just because company is publicly traded,
Mm,
it makes no difference for me if it was private company, because my analysis would be the same. I'm
right.
analyzing company as if I could buy the whole company, if I was buying the whole company, and therefore, and if I was willing to own it for 10 years or longer, because Warren Buffett says, when you make these decisions, think about, would you still want to buy this company if the stock market was closed for 10 years?
Right.
Suddenly, when you approach your decisions this way, then it changes the lens from which you look at the market and the stocks. And it doesn't mean that I will not be taking advantages of the volatility of the market. In other words, when if I bought a company that I thought is worth $100 and the market price is at 120, I'll be happy to give my stock back to the market. Now, or the market could uh, get into depressive modes and price something I think worth 100, maybe price it to $30, right? I'll be happy to take advantage of that. But even when I'm buying it, at $30, I'd be willing to own this company if the market was closed for 10 years. I
Mm,
would be still doing the research. I'd be looking at companies. Is it a good business? Does the company have a good balance sheet? Does it have a good management? All these different things. And I would try to figure out, I would ask myself, do I understand this business? I would want to know how much the company is worth. And based on this, how much discount, at what price I want to buy. So that's what would be going through my mind. And the word play would not be there.
mm. Do you use companies personally? I see pictures, by the way. You have a beautiful family. Do you and your family use a product or a service, often, maybe daily, weekly, of a company that you would never invest in?
Uh, well, I go to Costco, and I
Me
love
too.
the, I lo- yeah, I love
Me
those
too.
stores. In fact, I hate shopping, but I would volunteer. I'm the first one to volunteer to go to Costco when my
Great
wife asks me.
example.
And we don't own the stock because it's too expensive for us. So I would, so I, like I would argue the fact that even a person like me likes going there speaks a lot about the company. But you have to, make a distinction between a good company and a good stock. I love Costco, but it's just too expensive.
Yeah, I guess that's the kind of Wall Street perspective on stocks. I'm in the tech industry. I have a tech company, and
Mhm,
investors that I know, friends of mine, always asking me, hey, do you like Dell? And do you like, and I say, well, yeah, these companies make great products, and I use them. I don't know what Wall Street's perception is. I don't know anything else about them, but their products are good, and so I always wonder about the Wall Street perception versus Costco is a tremendous answer because I'm a Costco, I don't know what you want to
mm,
call it,
mm.
fanboy. But the stock, I don't, it's kind of, it's expensive. I don't know where it goes. Disney is another one. My girls love Disney, and I don't know if I would invest in that. So I guess, can you talk to a little bit about the difference between Wall Street perspective and just the general public and friends and your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to talk about Wall Street because I'm not even sure what Wall Street thinks. But let me tell you how I think about
Mm,
it. When I like the product, and a lot of people around me like the product, that's always a starting point.
mm,
But but that's never enough
mm,
because I mean, like the product today, and the competitors may come in tomorrow. So I when I do research, when we do research, we talk to people like you in the tech industry and say, what do you think as a person, as an insider of this company's product? Okay, because I would not have the knowledge that you would have
mm.
about it, a tech company. We would be talking to suppliers, we would be talking to competitors. Um, the liking a product is it's a good starting point, but you also have to understand that um, um, I'm trying to think of a fad that that came and went. Like
Peloton?
if you uh, gr- um, yeah, I'm not sure about, actually I don't even know what I think about Peloton, but the I'll give you an example. The cabbage dolls or something, a
Oh, yes.
cabbage something. This is even before my time.
Cabbage Patch
I'm
Dolls.
sure what was it?
Cabbage Patch Dolls, yes.
Yes, Cabbage Patch Dolls. I'm sure a lot of people loved it at some point in time, but that was a business that was mini Beanie Babies. That was another one. Beanie
Yes,
Babies was a you would have talked to so many people who were crazy about it,
right,
and then those people grew up, and the next generation did not care about it, right?
right.
So it's a like that liking the product is not enough.
Mm,
Okay, Costco, I would argue, what they have done, they their biggest advantage is the business model, their business model. They're able to sell, and they're selling so much more per square foot than almost any other retailer. Let me
right.
give you an example. The average Costco store, the one you probably you go to, has revenues, I think, about $300 million.
Wow.
That one store. Okay, but you know
Really?
what? Costco's advantage is that when you go to consumers, to Kroger or whatever the grocery store you have there, they're gonna have probably 80 to 100 cereals. Okay, and this is why I hate going there, because now I have to make all these choices between all these cereals. Costco, what they do, they pick the best three cereals, and so when I go, I don't suffer from this decision fatigue,
Mm,
right? And but think about this. They When you buy cereals at Costco, you're not going to buy a small box. You're going to buy a package of 4 or 5 boxes. Number one, and they load those cereals on this on the forklift, on the shelves, right?
right.
So their efficiency per store and their revenue per employee, I don't know the number, probably 10, 15 times greater than it would be from no normal grocery store. And so a grocery store has maybe 130,000 items, SKUs. Costco has 4,500.
Mm,
So anyway, like so, if I was analyzing Costco, that's what I would be thinking about. And so, and therefore, they can charge you less on the per pound or whatever basis. And but by the way, if you do the math, Costco basically, the profits they make from selling products just covers the costs. All their all their income, actually, like what you see as earnings, comes from membership fees.
really?
Yeah. Because you're paying about $60-$65 a year,
Something like that.
and
Yeah.
that's a 95% margin. So yes, that's if you look at what the membership revenues are and you look at the profits, that number is going to be identical or close.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible to me. And then so then we have to talk about I believe you're in favor and you like Tesla.
Well, let's okay. This is a great example where I absolutely love the car,
Yeah, I know you do.
don't love the
Got two
stock.
of them.
Um,
Ah,
don't love the stock, and this is another example. And I've done a tremendous amount of work on Tesla. I even wrote a little kind of there's a
yes.
if you look it up, I wrote a little
Absolutely.
booklet. I
Hmm.
don't call it a booklet on Tesla. And I like it's kind of interesting. If you don't own a Tesla, it's very difficult to explain to another person how great
Mm.
the car is. It's almost like I would say it's like trying to explain a rainbow to a blind man.
Hmm.
It's a I absolutely love the car, and I think electric cars are the future. And I have absolutely no doubt about that. However, you know, at what how much do you want to pay for the car company? The one that makes cars, and I would argue today it's too expensive. Uh, so that's what I think about. So this is again where I love the product, may not necessarily like the stock.
But that man, I mean, that company is, I don't know, less than 6, 7 years old, and they're selling more cars than General Motors, than Toyota, than all these big manufacturers. It's absolutely incredible.
Well, there's the I think they're no, I think they're Joe. I think they're 15 years old or so,
Oh,
maybe
they're
more
that
than that.
old. Okay.
Yeah, but they are selling more electric cars
Ah.
than so. I think this year they're going to sell about 1 million cars globally, and I maybe 400,000 or 500,000 in the United States. I'm not 100% sure about that number. Uh, well, we sell usually about 16 to 18 million cars in the United States. So General Motors will sell a few million, Toyota and Ford and others. So from a total number of cars perspective, they're still relatively small. From electric cars, they sell more than anybody else. Though today I read that
Fulfillment.
BYD, BYD, which is a Chinese company, now sells more cars, electric cars, than Tesla in China. So
Oh,
just
wow.
yeah.
Oh, wow. And there's a certain point where you started getting into Stoicism, where you found a nice outlet there, and I was fascinating hearing you talking about that. And can you talk about how you got there and how it
Yeah,
helps?
yeah. Well, so let me get a little bit self promotional for a second, okay?
Please.
So I was working on this book, which just came out 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Soul in the Game,
Soul in the
The Art
Game.
of Meaningful Life. Yes, The Art of Meaningful Life. And Joey, I was like on the last chapter of the book. I was done. I probably expected the book to be out at that point in a few months. And then I stumbled on Stoic philosophy, and it's like somebody hit me over the head with it. And I realized, oh my God, I have to learn it. And next 5 months, I basically was studying Stoic philosophy and writing about it at the same time. And so in the book, I spent maybe about 30-40% of the book talking about Stoic philosophy. But when I was writing this, I was writing it as much for me as for you,
Hmm.
because I wanted to write it so if you know nothing about it, how you could read it in a very accessible way and get interested in that and start implementing it. Because Stoic philosophy is one of those things that if you know but you don't do anything about it, you might as well not know it,
Wow.
because it's not going to help you very much. It's a I call it an operating system for life. And let me explain what I mean. When you and I were born, we basically kind of we had a hardware, our body, and we had some kind of rudiment. I'm talking to a tech guy. We kind of had DOS, kind of, or like a very low, like BIOS maybe, okay, but not even DOS, right? And then over time, like we would kind of our operating system would be written in a kind of in a very chaotic way, because your parents would teach you things, you have friends who influence you, your coworkers. Your life is a very good teacher and teaches you good things and bad things. And but I don't think I encountered kind of an operating system for life where you have like a very simple set of rules that would allow you to go through life and approach problems in a way that remove a lot of stress
Mm.
and allow you to have a happier life. Religions do this for some people, but I would argue Stoic philosophy would work well for somebody who has a religion, who is religious, and somebody who isn't. And it's a doesn't require you to have a belief of a it's not a religion. It doesn't require you to have a
Higher
belief
being.
of of high being, etc. at all. Um, and it what and I am trying I'm practicing Stoicism, and I fail a lot.
Mm.
Okay, but I'm trying to rewrite an operating system that that basically have been written for decades and decades. So it's going to take time. I told my wife that it's going to take some time. Uh, um, but I think if somebody takes it seriously and tries to implement it, it could really improve, kind of reduce the volatility of your blood pressure, kind of just remove a lot of negativity from your life.
Mm. Mm. And that follows another quote that you from Seneca, time discovers truth.
Yes. That is like I don't think he was writing about value investing when he said it,
But
but
still,
he could have been. I mean, who knows?
nevertheless.
Um, yeah, nevertheless, but he wrote it 2,000 years ago. Can you imagine that?
Right.
But if you think about investing, well, a couple things. First of all, this is probably one of my two favorite quotes. So that's one. The other one is by Confucius. We all have two lives. Two lives. The second one starts when we realize we only have one.
Huh.
That's my
Wow.
that's another quote that I really like. But let's talk about Seneca's quote. Time discovers truth. Well, if you apply it to investing, what I try to do when I analyze companies, when we value them, I'm just trying to figure out what the company is worth, where I think it will be trading at before time does discovers it. And that's what really, to me, kind of investing is about. Kind of just discover truth before time does. Just discover what the company is worth before time does.
Hmm.
Now, but that applies to when you and I have a conversation, we can have two type of conversations. We can try to convince each other in our point of view, or we can try to learn from each other.
Hmm.
Okay, in the conversation where we try to learn from each other, we're going to discover truth because we both going to learn something. In the conversation where we try to convince each other, we're probably both going to walk away with our opinions just more, with the same opinions, just more hardened same opinions.
Hmm.
And that's what happens kind of in a political tribalism.
Yes. Unfortunate. Yes. And that's nothing new. That's happened all a long time, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I reserve the right to change my mind on any given subject, given new evidence or given unlearned evidence. If we can all kind of adopt that, and out of the many disciplines, the podcast I talk a lot about discipline, but out of the many disciplines that you have, I mean, are you a writer first, Vitaliy? What are you first? I would say you're a father first, but let's just talk professional.
So writing, like, so for a long, long time, I would always say I'm an investor first and
Yeah.
writer second. And I did it, like, now I look at it, I did it defensively because I wanted to people to take me seriously as an
Right.
investor.
Right.
And now I don't. At some point, I stopped caring how people perceive
Right.
me, and I realized what writing is a very important part of me, because writing is that's the medium through which I think.
Mm.
Like for me to have an intelligent, well thought out idea or thought, I usually need to write it. I need to write it because when I write it, it allows me to explore it from different directions, etc. And this is why, like, I write 2 hours a day,
Yeah.
uh, every day, with very few exceptions. And that's, like, I would argue that's kind of my superpower, in the sense that that's like, I would not be as good of an investor if I wasn't writing.
Hmm.
I would not be as good of a human being if I was not writing.
Hmm.
So I would not be as good of a parent and everything else.
Hmm. Do you meditate?
I do. I had a, like, for 1 year I had a streak where I meditated every day,
Wow.
and then I fell off the wagon, and now I think I do like a few times a week, 3 4 times a week. And my goal is to find a way to link meditation to one of my habits. It's something I do
Mm.
all the time, so I can start meditating daily again.
Well, you journal every day, so right before or right after, perhaps.
Well, yeah, or like, let me tell you one new habit I created since I wrote the book, and been with me for now for 4 or 5 months probably. Um, I found that I drink a lot of coffee. Like, when I say a lot, 5 or 6 cups of coffee.
Whoa.
Yeah, a lot of it was happening not because I needed the juice to boost me and stuff. No, it just was laziness, or it was mindlessness. Actually, I I'm sitting at my desk. I would get bored. I'd go and make a cup of coffee. It just was mindless,
Hmm.
and I wanted to figure out how can I drink less coffee, and I found a solution. For every cup of coffee now that I drink, at either at home or at the office, I do 30 push-ups.
Huh.
And so I've been drinking 2 or 3 cups of coffee a day, and I've been doing 60, 90 push-ups.
Wow.
So that was like but if you think about what we're trying to do, a lot of things is, if you were computers, if we did not have emotions, if we had a perfect willpower, we would be just going to the doctor gives us the menu, exactly what we should be doing, how many minutes you should be riding a peloton, how many minutes you should be lifting weights, how much sugar, they would give us exactly what we need to do, and we would do that, right? But we are humans, right? And therefore, a lot of times we're doing things we know we shouldn't be doing, but we still do this. So all I try to do is kind of to trick myself to do things in a way that I could still, like, it's almost like I'm trying to, it's a self deception to some degree, right? Um, is trying to overcome my own willpower, like trying to use my willpower to help me, basically, or trying to boost my willpower as much as I can. So anyway, so a lot of the tricks I do, and like when we link one habit to another, right? If you,
Right.
like, maybe I should be, after I brush my teeth in the morning, maybe that's when I should meditate,
Right.
because so, or I used to, when I did this, I walked. I still do this every single day. I walk in the park about an hour a day, 50 minutes to an hour a day. And for a long, long time, oh, actually, I know now why I quit meditating. For a long, long time, I would walk in the park, and after that, I would meditate. And I think it got cold, or there were a few days where it was very, very cold, and I didn't meditate because it was very cold. And that's kind of, that's how I fell off the wagon.
Uh,
Now I
uh,
remember how it happened. So,
uh, the habits broke. Very interesting. I'm not a coffee drinker, but every once in a while or too often, I have a bowl of ice cream. I just wrote a note, 30 push-ups equals ice cream. I love that. And I think that's, just associate it. So I talk a lot about discipline. I lost 130 pounds. When I started my business, I got too overweight, and people ask me how I did it, like there's some secret, and I always just say it's just discipline. I got focused. The doctor said I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. That's all I needed to hear, and so I did it. Do you consider yourself a disciplined person, Vitaly?
yes and no. I have a willpower to give up bad habits. I don't have as much willpower to instill new good habits.
Mm.
I'll give you an example. Like, one day I told myself I'm gonna stop drinking Coke and Pepsi, and that was it. And I one day I stopped putting sugar in my coffee or my tea. That was it. Um, when I'm in Denver, I don't eat meat or or desserts.
Hmm.
So it's easy for me. I find that it's easy for me to. So it's what's important is to separate to create good habits, something you're gonna do every day that's positive, versus giving up
Hmm.
bad habits. So it was easy for me to give up bad habits. Like I quit smoking. It was very difficult, but I did. Uh, Now, let me tell you, like I realized that some like 3 years ago that maybe close to 4 years ago now that I need to work out. And I tried working out before, and I think my at the time maybe 2 weeks was it 2 weeks or a month at the most when I worked out. And 3 or 4 years ago, I hired a trainer, and the trainer would show up twice a week at this office, and we have a gym here, and basically, you know, we would work out. I would work out, and he'd tell me what to do, and that was the only way I could stick to doing this. So
Hmm.
I realized my weakness, and I realized that I needed a trainer to help me deal with that. And that's how and that's what I did. So I had to create external pressure,
Hmm.
even stronger external pressure for me to keep working out.
Very interesting. You knew your limits and you knew what you needed to get there. As investors, what you talk to investors, I mean, is there a certain discipline needed in that? I talked about the word, somebody used the word play once, and talk about a discipline as far as investment.
Oh, discipline invest. I mean, discipline is like at the core of investing.
Mm,
If you should be disciplined in knowing. Um, but first of all, I mean, there's so many. I mean, it's I almost like everything I talk about investing, discipline would be part of it. You
mm,
should be disciplined in knowing how much of not following fads. You should be disciplined following your process. You should be disciplined knowing where where you have high IQ in EQ and where you have low. Like
hmm,
for example, when it comes to deeply cyclical companies, my EQ is very volatile, and it's very low. It's very volatile when it comes to those stocks. So I have a discipline, no matter how attractive the company looks, how cheap it is, not to buy the company because I know that I will not be a rational person while I own it because
wow.
my EQ will fluctuate. So no, discipline is incredibly part of investing. It's incredibly important in investing. And if you have a process, and I would argue you should, if you invest, you should follow that process. Like what I described to you, how what we're looking for. And I'll tell you this: you st- my as I involved as an I evolved as an investor over the last. I've been doing it for 25 years, so over the last 5 or 10 years, I used to would I in the past I would buy a company if it was very cheap. I would buy it even if I did not like the management,
Wow.
even if I didn't like the balance sheet. Now I'm disciplined enough to have absolute like demand that I want to only buy companies that have very high quality management, very good balance sheets. And so and that requires discipline and self-control,
Hmm.
not to kind of fall off the wagon and just buy something that looks very cheap, but you might be violating your principles.
Yeah, and at one point you talked about when looking at companies like that, how important it is that the CEO and the leadership actually have stock in the company.
Yeah, it's incredibly so let me give you tell you this one story. At the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, Warren Buffett was asked if he would insure Berkshire Hathaway, which is one of the largest insurance companies out
Sure.
there, if they would insure Musk's rocket going to Mars. Uh, Buffett said, "Yeah, no problem, but I'll have two prices: one with Musk in the rocket, and the one him not being in a rocket. Yeah. And if you think about it, it tells you so much because when I'm sure when Musk is working on a spacecraft or the rocket, whatever they using to where they want to go to Mars, he wants to make sure that those people on that shuttle on that spacecraft would survive. Would survive, would not get harmed. But it's almost like our genetic programming to care about ourselves more than we care about others. It just That's how we survived as a species, for 300,000 years. Um, and therefore, if he was on the spacecraft, he would spend so much more time double checking every single
Right.
formula, etc. So same applies to companies. When you have a management that is just spending time until he retires at the company, the decisions he'll make will be different than a person for who truly has soul in the game, skin and soul in the game, for
Mm.
whom this is his Mona Lisa or Sistine Chapel, etc. That person will be thinking about every decision very differently. If that person makes a mistake, and everybody will at some
Right.
point, the person will work overtime. Like Elon Musk slept on the on in the factory floor when when Tesla had production problems. So it makes a huge difference. Yes, absolutely. So we most of the companies we own, management owns a lot of stock for that reason.
Right. Yeah, they have skin in the game. I recently saw I subscribed to some of Warren Buffett's kind of quotes, and there's a quick video where somebody asked him about if he listens to economists, and he said he's never known a rich economist.
Very true. Well, it's for the same reason. I mean, he's so right. I mean, the only rich economists are the ones who made you buy their books or something. Yeah, but not because they're not
Mhm.
rich because of the forecasts. And
Right.
this is where I talked about how, like, I may have opinions about macroeconomic issues, and so does Buffett, and he's happy to share them. It's the But understanding that this is economy is such an incredibly complex system where, like, there was I forget the origin of this, but the if the butterfly flaps wings in the Singapore, we're gonna have a hurricane in Kansas or something. It's that kind of complex system.
Mm.
Um, so absolutely, I have opinions about macroeconomics. Yeah, macroeconomics, and we as I mentioned before, we position portfolio to avoid or benefit from those huge macro wins. But at the same time, I realize my limitations, and I think it's very important to do this.
If somebody comes to you and wants, and is adamant about investing in a place, and they're asking your opinion and you disagree, but they still want to do it. I mean, do you take them on? What happens in this particular scenario?
You think about if a client wants to.
Yeah,
Uh, well, no, that's not what we do though. So people come to us, they bring us their, a lot of times a good chunk of their retirement money or savings, and say invest it for me.
I see.
So we have a full discretion over our decisions. So if somebody wants to buy whatever Bitcoin or whatever it is, I tell them my opinion about this, but it's their decision.
Hmm,
So we would not be buying it for them; they would be buying it in their other accounts that we don't manage.
hmm. Can you talk about cryptocurrency for a little
Sure.
bit? I know what
Sure.
Mr. Buffett's opinion is. What's yours?
Well, first of all, it's a cryptocurrencies, plural.
Hmm.
Okay, so there's for Bitcoin maximalists, there is only one God, and that's Bitcoin. And for many other people, there are a whole bunch of other currencies. So, God, there's so many ways to approach this. Well, number one, a currency, money, is a story. Okay, it's a story that the more widely it's bought into, it's a kind of network effect. The more people believe into a story, the more valuable the currency becomes. I'll give an example. When you were 5 years old, your father took you to a grocery store and you saw your father buying milk, going to the cash register, you know, and given this paper for that, right? Uh, and you learn that this buys this. The dollar is money. And same happens in different currencies around the world, right? So we learned that like 100% of the, 99.99% of the society accepts that the dollar is the currency in the United States. And the government reminds you of that because they tax you in that currency. Okay.
Yeah.
So the cryptocurrencies are alternatives that don't have that story. I mean,
Hmm.
there's a lot of, like, I would argue there's a cryptocurrency or chain as a technology. This is very different, may have applications, great, but should that be trading at $40,000 a million or 5 cents? I have no idea,
Hmm.
because I don't like, it's impossible to value it because it's a because it has no cash flows. Now, the for it gets more interesting, if Bitcoin at some point, let's just focus on Bitcoin. If Bitcoin at some point becomes this, like, more and more people will start believing in it, and suddenly it starts competing for, with world dominance with US dollar, the US government will put an end to it.
Yeah.
Because US government has a monopoly on the dollar. But it's what does it mean to have a monopoly on the dollar? Well, they have a monopoly on politicians have a monopoly on making promises and not keeping them.
Hmm.
And the gap between where the promise was and where the reality is, that's how much money we print.
Wow.
So therefore, the US, if Bitcoin will become suddenly successful and and threatens to dethrone the US dollar, it will be banned by
Hmm.
by the government. It's a because if we lose control of the US dollar, then we're gonna have a political sorry we're gonna have political unrest.
Hmm. Now there's some countries like in Central America that have adopted it, correct?
Yeah, I'm going blank
Costa
on the
Rica or Panama?
no, somebody else. It's a tiny country, and I'm going blank on the name now. But they wish they didn't because they adopted it at a higher price. How do you actually even adopt it as a currency
Yeah.
when something fluctuates so much? When
Right.
you go to buy a car and you're gonna say, I'm gonna pay $20,000, I'm gonna come tomorrow and bring you cash, and then become tomorrow they say, oh, by the way, the price went up, now it's 25. No, the price, now it's 25,000. Um, how do you even conduct a business this way? So it's a um, I'm going blank on the name though. But the yes, it's like, listen, I can see how if you lived in some banana republic where the government can, overnight, print a lot of money. Like, I understand how that, they can adapt it as a currency because the alternatives are so much worse. Um, and but at the same time, those are the edge cases. Those are not the mainstream cases for the,
Hmm.
for cryptocurrencies.
And it's fascinating. It's just fascinating what technology comes up with, and in the industry, I'm just always fascinated to see what kind of shortcuts or what kind of how technology does it solve a problem or does it create more? I guess that's more of a
Joey, let me just actually, I want to add one point, something I never discussed before, but this is something very important. A lot of people got attracted to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies because they were buying lottery tickets. There was a lot of
Mm,
liquidity in the system, and they were just buying. Those were get rich scams, basically. Just
mm,
people were looking to become millionaires overnight because they know people who have. Right. By the way, the same thing happened with the NFTs and other stuff.
right.
Now, this is very important. When the Bitcoin price declined, we uh, we basically figured out who was swimming naked, and by meaning, but we kind of the water declined, and now we see this. What was the plumbing, no, below the surface that drove the price up? And what we see, there is a pseudo financial system that was kind of developed under cryptocurrencies, where
Wow.
they had these exchanges and banks, not government control, not banks registered with the government, but basically companies that would loan you money against your cryptocurrencies, and were had very little equity, and just a small decline in the cryptocurrencies wiped them out. So what we basically saw, um, a lot of corruption, a lot of
Wow.
not even corrupt, a lot of malfeasance, basically,
Hmm.
and that which allowed those cryptocurrencies to go up as much as they have, and as much as they have, and as the price declined, it's basically the reason it really pains me is that because a lot of people lost their life savings.
Right.
Well, in the past, I was asked about cryptocurrencies. I told them that I don't own any, and I would not invest in them. And like just like the answer I gave you about playing in the stock market, I gave them the same answer. Just take as much money as you can afford to lose gambling.
Hmm.
Okay, that's all it should be, not more than that. And the problem is, you're reading stories of people losing their life savings because they invested in some pseudo financial entities that were paying them 15-20% returns. There was a one. I thought it was a as a Ponzi scheme as I ever, like this was the pure Ponzi scheme. So there's one vehicle where basically when the price of currency declined, people who put money originally could, the company froze the deposits, so you can't take the money out. But they offered new depositors 20% return. Okay, and so think about what they would do. They would just take that money that and so people are attracted by 20% return. So they would take money from new investors to be able to pay off the old ones.
Wow.
That is Ponzi scheme.
That's Ponzi. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. You know, people are blinded by these kind of success stories that are this is where discipline comes in, correct? I mean,
Yeah, no, I think successful investing is investing slow, it's getting rich slowly.
right.
Unfortunately, that's how you get rich slowly. Unless you build your own business where you put in sweat equity. That's the only kind of, and that's, but you're still taking a whole bunch of risk that, that may or may not work out. But when people get rich fast, and that's a relative word, it's by putting their own sweat equity, into
Mm.
something, creating a product that, other people need. Though, and those cryptocurrencies are, were not that.
Vitaly, what motivates you?
That's a great question. What motivates me? I like, if you and I talked 5 years ago, I would have given you a different answer, and I'm not even sure what that answer would have been. But now I am creativity. That's what motivates me.
Mm.
Investing, writing is a that what basically curiosity. That's what lights up. Kind of that what lights me up and kind of moves me going forward. Like when I sit, like I'll give an example by writing. When I sit down to write, a lot of times I have a kind of a kernel of an idea, but I have no idea how it's going to look like.
Mm.
And that curiosity, that is the kind of the dopamine I get when I finish it. Now that's the upside. The downside, a lot of times that journey comes with a lot of pain, a lot of frustration. And I, the reason I be able to write because curiosity won and fear lost. In that, and what like I'm not motivated by money. Like
Mm.
that's really, in fact, I do very little for money now. Like it's a I am motivated by learning from other people, I love, like the relationships are very important to me. Um, and the creativity is a huge source of motivation for me. Learning also, I love to learn, so that's another one. Um,
It's a wonderful answer. How much where you are right now, given that answer, do you think you approach solutions and approach the way you do things more in an artful way or a scientific way?
wow.
Art being more gut and creative, science being more formulaic research logical.
I think it depends. There is no good answer because it depends.
Mm,
I would argue in investing, both science and art are important. Okay, because if I'm only following science and that is just pure logic,
right,
I'll be competing against computers
right.
who are, don't need to be fed. They can work 24/7. Don't take lunch breaks. Um, and so I can't really win in that game. Where creativity and art allows me to look at things and see things differently the way computers can't. Um, so in that regard, I need to have both. I still need to have
Mhm,
logic, but the creativity and art helps me, helps me to kind of solve problems differently, see things differently. Now, when I try to be spending more time, as much time as possible, in a scientist mode, meaning that when I have conversation with people, I try to learn as much as possible. When I debate other people, I try to debate in a scientist mode where the subject we're talking about is a hypothesis, and if I started with this hypothesis and somebody proved it wrong, this is great. I learned something.
mm,
It's not something that comes always came easy to me. It's something that was a learned behavior. It was not innate to me. So I had to learn that. Um, so um, art also is very important to me because I love classical music, and that, like asking me, like that adds flavor to my life.
mm.
That's, the very important flavor that, without which, the life would just kind of would lose its color. So that's, so there's so many ways to answer it, but I guess in different part of it, I need to have both. Some parts I need to have both, and some parts I need to have when I listen to classical music, I'm in, I guess, in my art mode, not in the scientist mode. But so it depends.
And perhaps a direct example of this is your arrival to Stoicism. How perhaps when you were younger, you're a bit more scientific, but to get there, you had to kind of go outside that.
Um, I had, you know what it is. It's a When something hits you over the head,
Mm,
don't just, stop and actually kind of acknowledge that and maybe realize you may have to go a different direction now. I'll give you one story. This little anecdote that changed me as a writer. So this is at 2004, 2005. I've been writing for the street.com at the time, maybe for 6 months. So I had a full-time job managing money, and I started writing for the street.com. And Joey, I was my writing was so dry and boring. It
really.
was so precise. I had like so and I wrote like about, like, you read my articles and they would put you to sleep. I mean, in fact, I would be embarrassed, if somebody found them now. Now, and then something happened to me. So I had this TiVo device and I called technical support. And remember, this is 2004,
Okay.
and their automated answering system, like, it was completely voice recognition system. And this is 18 years ago, so it wasn't very good.
Right.
And as you can tell, I have an accent. So I'm talking to this system and it doesn't understand me. I'm trying to get an answer, it doesn't understand me. So, and there's my 3-year-old son, Jonah, who is I don't know, sitting there on the floor playing with his truck or something. And he has this perfect Disney accent, just perfect. So I give him the phone and I tell him what to say. And I tell him what to say. He talks into the phone, and magically the system understands him, right? So why this is important? Because so I wrote this article about this experience. This article was not very large. It's a very short article, right? I'm just talking about this. And suddenly I like get more emails on one article than I get in the previous 100 articles. And I realized that it's okay to be yourself.
Right.
It's okay to be vulnerable a little bit. That I do have an accent. It's okay to be funny. And that changed me as a writer.
Right. Vulnerable.
And that again, it's a little story. It's a tiny little story, but it's and I would argue in your life when these little moments happen to you, just don't like I could have said, "Oh, this is cute," and just moved on and kept writing those dry articles. If that happened, you and I would not be talking because
Right.
I would not be writing books and etc. And nobody would care what I have to say. Uh, so that's very important.
What a wonderful story. So, how do you measure success, Vitali?
Measure success. You left all the difficult questions to the end. My God. Um, so I all my goals are process based. In other words, I don't have like my company doesn't have a financial goal. We have to have this kind of revenues because and from a Stoic perspective, they would say that it's external to me. I can't really control where the revenues are going to be.
Mm.
What I can control is my process. Do we do a good job analyzing stocks? Do we have a good do we have a good investment process? Uh, do we treat clients well? Do you have a good customer service? Do we do a good job kind of spreading our message about the firm? So all those things I have control over. Okay, and but I have no control where our revenues are going to be.
Mm.
So therefore, I just focus. So all my goals are kind of process based. Um, and I think I like my success. You can argue if I'm living according to my values. And one of the things is, I want to be net positive to society. So, and I try very hard to treat everybody well.
Mm.
I don't always succeed, but I even when I get telemarketer call me, if I get a telemarketer who calls me during dinner, I still and I almost never fail try to treat that person with respect. And let me tell you why, because my God, what a horrible job they have. I mean,
Yes.
like I feel sorry for them. Number one, so I don't want to make their life even more difficult. And number two, like treating people well is a muscle. If you train that muscle to treat everybody well, not just telemarketers, not just people who you may argue below your status, whatever,
Mm.
then you're gonna treat everybody well. Then you're gonna treat people who you're gonna develop a muscle where it's gonna become your default behavior. Then you won't have to think about it. You just treat everybody well. Um, and so you know, I also try very very hard to be kind. And I have this. I forget who said it. Whenever you say something, it has to go through three gates. Is it true? Um, is it necessary? Is it kind?
Hmm.
So when you say something to somebody, if you think about, okay, what
Hmm.
I'm about to say, is it true? Do I have to say this? Okay, is it kind? And this is what I try very hard to live my life. And the last thing I want to say is that no, the last thing I want the last thing I want to say is that the I am practicing, which means I don't succeed every single time,
Mm.
but I realize every time I fail, I look at it and say, how can I do better next time, and keep moving forward, because it's very important for us to forgive ourselves for it's like like approach this. treat myself the same way I treat my children. When they fail at something, we kind of look at what they did. We examine this. I still encourage them they can do better next time.
Hmm.
When they succeed at something, I can congratulate the hell out of them, because that even reinforces their confidence. Um, and I think we do this with our kids, but we forget to do this to ourselves. We forget to be kind to ourselves. When we screw up, we start self punishing ourselves. And sometimes we should be kind in the sense like, okay, what can I learn from this? Uh, okay, well, I'll try to do better next time. And when we succeed at something, let's take a victory lap.
Important to celebrate your successes. A lot of people forget to do that.
Yeah.
Very important. What a pleasure speaking to you today. I really enjoyed learning about you, and I enjoyed even more talking to you. How can we get in touch with you? You got, of course, the great website, Contrarian Edge.
Well, so that book I just wrote, Soul in the Game.
Yes.
So we have a website, and let me tell you why the website is important. The website is soulinthegame.net. The reason it's important because after I wrote the book, I could not stop writing.
Right.
So I ended up writing another 4 or 5 chapters. In fact, the only reason I could let myself kind of stop writing this book is by promising that I'm going to keep writing. Okay, and so if you go to soulinthegame.net, there are instructions where if you buy the book, there is a place where you even send an email, you get the new chapters I wrote for absolutely free, and I'll keep adding chapters as time goes by. So you can continue reading this book even even after you bought it. So with new content. So yeah, soulinthegame.net. Also, we have a I would less sophisticated podcast. The reason it's less sophisticated because it's basically my articles are read to you by a very talented fellow.
I listen to
And
many of them.
so if you like to listen to podcasts, which I would assume somebody who's listening to us right now probably likes that, right? That's
Yes.
a good assumption to make. Then you can look for, if you go to investor.fm, or just look for Intellectual Investor podcast, and then you have 158 episodes you can go back and binge listen to. So um, anyway, so that's how people can find us.
You also have a LinkedIn, of course, and a YouTube that I watch some of the videos on as well. We'll put in our show notes. Uh, are you on social media at all? I didn't seem to find you.
Yeah, so I enjoy Twitter. I honestly enjoy Twitter, and it's one of my guilty pleasures.
Really?
Yeah, and yeah, it's my first name, last name initial, Vitaliy K. And I enjoy Twitter because Twitter is actually, I want to talk about this for a second, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Twitter is like, imagine, and this is my friend Guy Spear, gave me, kind of gave me this framework how to look at Twitter. Imagine you go to a bookstore. It sells 100,000 books, right? And you can go to magazine sections, you can go to cooking section, you can go to sports section, or you can go to philosophy section, right? Just because you're in a bookstore does not mean that you'll be consuming what's appropriate for you. So now it's up to you decide which section you want to go to. So Twitter is kind of like this. There's 200 million people on Twitter,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people you want to follow and there are people you don't want to follow.
Right.
So if you are interested in Stoic philosophy, there's a lot of brilliant people who write about Stoic philosophy. You can follow them. If you are interested in art, there's plenty of that too. If you're interested in politics, you can do that. I would not advise because it's just going to raise your blood pressure.
Yes.
But so there is something, if you want to learn, such a great platform to go to, and to get knowledge from somebody else.
Hmm.
And also, don't forget to follow people you disagree with,
Right.
because uh, otherwise you're going to have a very boring and uninteresting life. Um, so I'm on Twitter, probably actually post more than I should.
Wow.
And so if you want interested in my thoughts about Ukraine, war in Ukraine, about investing, about life, all these different things, uh, Then just follow me on Twitter as well. Yeah.
I'll follow. Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. We'll also put the book title in there. Absolute pleasure talking with you. Next time, just came back from Denver, but I'm there quite often, and
Oh,
maybe
nice.
we'll have a cup of coffee and do 30 push-ups together.
All right, Joe. Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. It was a lot
Th-
of fun. Thank you.
Thanks so much. You be well. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.